The first thing really everyone needs to understand is that the IT industry, including cloud and DevOps, security, software development, it is full of people that had 0 degrees or experience starting out. So the question is not, is it possible? The question is whether you have what it takes. Hi, and welcome to the Get in the Cloud podcast. My name is Coyne. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about how to go from 0 experience or degree to having a role in cloud. And I want to start a little bit with my story so that you can have a good understanding of how the process worked for me. And I'll share some other stories as well, so you can maybe get a little bit of a taste for how these kinds of things happen for me and for different folks that I've met in the industry. So I went to college for mathematics, went to university, and I was mainly driven by the fact that I was the first person in my family to have gone to college. So that was really the main motivator. I didn't know what I wanted to do, didn't know what degree I wanted to get. So I decided to get a mathematics degree. And when I graduated, I really didn't have a lot of initiative to understand what I wanted to do after graduation. But I had a friend who worked at the local high school, and they had an opening for a math teacher. And so that's where I ended up going, was becoming a math teacher. But I loved building computers. I took one A+ class in college, so I was able to learn a little bit about how the inside of computers work. And I was very curious and ambitious around computers and the internet. The internet was very new at the time. So I would build computers and I would help other folks build computers. I would troubleshoot computers. And this was all things that I was learning basically on my own. I kind of became well known in the church that I was going to, that I would help folks repair their computers or do some kind of troubleshooting for their home network or things like that. And I was pretty familiar with modems and how they work. And so I was helping different individuals in my community with their IT issues. And eventually, I was looking for a job and was speaking with folks that I knew. And I had one connection at church who worked in an IT shop at a local business. We had a discussion about my skills and abilities and the role that he was looking for, and I was eventually able to get my first role with him at his company. That's how a lot of folks. That's the story that a lot of folks have, right? We learned on our own time, and our own skill. We kind of grow into the role, kind of like a shade tree mechanic. If you've ever heard this saying, the shade tree mechanic, it's somebody who is a mechanic, but they don't work for a shop. They work for themselves, and their capabilities spread through word of mouth. Oftentimes they're maybe cheaper than a shop because they don't have the same overhead that a shop has, right? And it's somewhat a little bit risky maybe to hire them for the first time. But if you find out that they're really good, then it doesn't matter. You'll hire them over and over again. It doesn't matter that they don't work for a mechanic shop. If you can do the work, you're a mechanic, right? So I want you to think about that. You likely have someone in your life that's like that. You know a guy that's a plumber. Maybe he doesn't work for a plumbing company. Or you know a guy who's an electrician, or you know a guy who's a yard guy who doesn't work for a big company. It's just him, and he can do the work, and his reputation precedes him, and so you hire him. So I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. That's the way tech works. Tech is a skills-based job, so it works like every other skills-based job. If you can do the work, if you can improve yourself, if your reputation precedes you, then you'll find work. And that's the end of the story. I have another guy that I worked with very early in my career. He was a Microsoft SQL DBA. And when I got to talking to him, he was older than me at the time. And so it helped me in a lot of ways to understand kind of what corporate life was going to be like and guide me in some of those things. But he was a master jeweler. He'd worked in a jewelry store, not just worked in a jewelry store, but he was a jeweler. He could build custom jewelry and cut gems and do all of, basically fashion his own jewelry from scratch. So he was very sophisticated in a particular role. And what happened was the company that he worked for ended up with a computer and needed to run a database for customers, or I can't remember the exact story, but it was kind of like they got this database, they needed someone to run it, and he was in the store and he was willing to just raise his hand and say, I'll run it. I'll figure out how to make this database work. And through that experience, he went to another company and did the same thing. And over time, if you work in a position long enough, you are that position. Once you get enough experience, then you are whatever it is. So of course, being a jeweler is tough. You're working with very noxious chemicals, and it's not quite as glamorous as it sounds when he's telling me stories about what it was really like. It wasn't very glamorous. And of course, DBA work pays really well. And he ended up making the switch to become a DBA. The first thing really everyone needs to understand is that the IT industry, including cloud and DevOps, security, software development, it is full of people that had 0 degrees or experience starting out. So the question is not, is it possible? The question is whether you have what it takes. So now, hopefully I've convinced you that it's possible. Let's talk about what you're going to need to do to break into cloud, to break into security, to DevOps, and to IT in general. I want to just talk to you about that process of going from 0 to hero, from having none of the experience or degree to getting your first role. Really, the key aspect that's going to get you started, and you go back to my shade tree mechanic, is you need the skills. You're going to need to be able to do the work and have familiarity with the role that you're targeting. And that's going to come through, you have a lot of pathways to get to that point. But at the end of the day, you need to understand the technology. You need to understand what it is that the role is going to be doing. And you get that through training, whether it's free courses, whether it's paid training courses, whether it's online courses and videos, whether it's a low-cost boot camp or a white glove, high touch boot camp, or a university training or boot camp, or a 2-year associate degree if you want to go that route as well. Like there's all kinds of paths, but at the end of the day, you should be learning about the technology that is key in the area for the role that you're looking to get into, and you should be growing in your knowledge of that space. If you're doing training videos and you're just forgetting everything you've learned, that's not going to be helpful. You need to be able to do the work and speak to it. No one's going to recommend some kind of mechanic who messed up their car, right? You're going to need to be able to execute, right? And executing in a large part is going to have to do with the experience you gain through your training process. And the way you gain experience through your training process is by doing projects, is by volunteering, by doing labs, by testing out the different kind of projects that you're looking at, blogging and sharing your journey, right? You'll want to do things along with your training that are going to embed that knowledge so that it becomes something that you can recall, something you can talk about intelligently. It's very important that you not just go through training videos and try to memorize things for a certification test, because that memorization, it will fail if you don't have that experience. And having that real experience in the interview process really helps you to sound authentic. If someone's asking you about a DevOps pipeline and you go into your discussions about how you built a Jenkins pipeline that pulled code out of GitHub and deployed it into AWS, they might ask you, well, what were some challenges? and you could go into whatever those challenges were. I set up the initial permissions to be too strict. I ran into a number of errors in the script. I wasn't logging errors good enough really to find it, so I had to turn on additional logging and add additional logging into my CI/CD pipelines. That helped me to discover that I had a permissions issue. Then I had to update the permissions to be able to accomplish the goal that I was doing. It's just a common everyday issue for a new CI/CD pipeline. And the fact that you've done it and can talk about your process of having walked through that is going to make it seem like you really do have a lot of experience and understand what you're trying to do. Even for junior roles where they might not even be expecting that much experience, the fact that you're able to talk about intelligently about the work that you've done and the training that you've done will really help. Certifications help as well. So certifications kind of open the door for those conversations with recruiters and the interviewers. So experience and certifications are kind of a combo. People often talk to them as an either or. Should I have experience or should I have certifications? You should get both. You really should work on both. If you ramp up and get 6 certifications and you don't really have a whole lot of experience, it's not going to really open a lot of doors unless someone needs to maintain partner status and they need your cert specifically. You'll struggle. Even if it does open a door for you, you're going to struggle on the job because you don't have enough familiarity or experience to be able to do the work. And so step 1 is to get the skills, to go through whichever process is comfortable for you. And there's lots of them to get the skills. You need to get the experience and certifications. And then the last of the 3 steps is you need to network. You need to utilize LinkedIn. You need to utilize different communities. You need to utilize meetups. You need to utilize your friends and family networks. If you have a church you go to or synagogue, any of those networks as well. Any networks that you're a part of, you're going to need to brand yourself and make your journey public and let people know. You're going to join new networks, of course, but you'll utilize your existing networks as well. You likely know people that work in IT today, and it's very likely that if they feel like you're putting in the work and if they feel like you're getting some experience, they can make introductions for you. And you shouldn't be shy about asking for that, right? This is your future career, and this is how candidates are found. People would much rather hire someone like you with high integrity and hard work, who's ambitious and who's learning, than someone who is potentially spit out of the education system who thinks they deserve it, or who thinks that because they have $150,000 in college debt that they need to make $175,000 per year as a junior. You're in a unique position. If you're switching from a kind of any other traditional job where you're making $60,000 or $70,000 a year and that's good money, moving to IT and making $60,000 and $70,000 a year is very attractive to potential hirers, especially if you're doing cloud or DevOps or things like that. That is a compelling salary for a starting salary. And if people believe that you're ambitious and that you can do the work, it's a really easy sell for them. But you have to get your foot in the door, and that's where your networks are going to make a big difference. If you can have backside introductions to the hiring managers, have a conversation with them. Maybe you're having a conversation with them from a mentor-mentee perspective. And it's not really about getting a job. It's about, hey, this is what I've done so far. Maybe you don't have roles that are open right now, but if you did, what would be the kinds of things you would want me to focus on so that I would be a good candidate from an associate perspective or a junior perspective? I feel like in a lot of cases, if you're an introvert, then it's easy to buckle down on the training. It's easy to buckle down on the experience and certifications. You'll do projects all night long. When it comes to the networking side, it's very hard. I can tell you it's very challenging to really put yourself out there, to really think of this next role as selling yourself, making connections with strangers, asking for favors. But the thing you need to understand is that in order for IT to continue, we need the next generation. We need folks that are new to be coming into the business. We want those folks to be ambitious. In many cases, your previous job can be helpful. So I know of a gentleman I talked to recently, mentored him, and he got his first role. He had a background in healthcare, and it wasn't IT. He didn't have an IT background, but he had a healthcare background. So when I made some introductions for him to a healthcare company, and his experience really related. It really did set him up in a good position. So if you are a nurse switching to IT, there are a lot of healthcare companies where you might have a particular IT role where understanding how a hospital works is a huge advantage, way over someone who understands the tech, because a person who understands the tech, it will be almost impossible for them to ever learn what it's like to work in a hospital, like for real, learn what it's like. But it's not that hard for a nurse to learn the tech and to get up to speed on the particular applications or systems that a company is using, right? So that, don't think of your past experience as a negative. It can very well potentially be a big positive in your favor. But like the shade tree mechanic, you're going to need to have a reputation, and your reputation and your brand needs to be positive. People need to associate you with someone who is competent, who is reliable, who is ambitious, who's interested in learning and growing and being committed, who's not trying to make $250,000 out of the gate. Like, you're humble, but you're ambitious. And people, I hire people like that all the time. If some kid off the street comes up and says, "Hey, I'm starting a lawn mowing business. I'll charge you $15 to mow your lawn and weed eat, and I'll do a good job," I'm gonna give them a shot. There's no reason not to. Give them a shot, give them some feedback, and away you go. So really, that's what you need to think about. Think about in I'm sure in your own life you've hired people like this. Now, sometimes it's been negative. It didn't work out, and some people say they're this and that, and it turns out they're not as good as they say they are. And you just don't want that to be you, right? And no one's going to blame you for not having the full experience out of the gate. IT is a very, I think, forgiving environment. So that's not really going to be the struggle. The struggle is going to be getting those introductions, making sure that you do a good job and you lean in on your role once you get it. And that's probably a topic for another. I think that the first 90 days is something that deserves its own treatment. So be encouraged, right? There is a pathway. Many people before you have gone through this pathway. People are doing it today. They're going from zero experience in IT, maybe familiar with computers, to getting a role in cloud, getting a role in cyber, getting a role in data and analytics, getting some of these other roles. So be encouraged, but know yourself. You need to make sure that you're ready to head down kind of this hard path for a rewarding career. I'll say it's simple, but it's not easy, right? I've explained to you what you need to do. If you do those things, it will work, but it's not easy. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of investment that's needed to make the transition. Many people don't start because they don't believe it's possible. It is possible. It's absolutely possible. But you're going to need to do the work. You're going to need to invest. You're going to have to make sacrifices. There's really no other way around it. You'll likely have doubt. There'll be places where you get stuck and you'll have doubts. But if you keep pressing forward with the simple kind of 3-step program, eventually you'll get your shot. You'll get a role. Your first role might not be the best role. You might not like exactly what you're doing, but once your foot's in the door, then growing into other roles is even easier, of course, than going from zero to hero. So be encouraged and good luck.
All right, you made it to the end of the episode. Great job. Be sure to follow this podcast for more great episodes. I release a new one every week. I created this podcast to help people just like you with the secrets to jumpstarting their cloud career. But I need your help. Please rate and review this podcast on Spotify or Apple. And of course, share this with anyone you know that is also on this journey as well. Thanks again for listening. Let's get into cloud.